We are back. That's right. We are back to the Race and Ethnic Relations on Campus podcast show. I am Dr. B. Welcome back to our show. This is show number 60. That's right. This is show number 60. And it's entitled The NFL and the Lack of Black Coaches. The lack of black head coaches. It's ridiculous. That's right. I'm going there right now. This is show number 60, and it's entitled The NFL and the Lack of Black Head Coaches. We have just witnessed over the weekend the NFC and AFC championship games, of which the Cincinnati Bengals and the Los Angeles Rams won their games. Yet the reality of the NFL as we prepare for the Super Bowl is that there is only one African American black head coach in the NFL. That's ridiculous. And I'm going to talk about that during this next podcast show. Yeah, it's really serious. And again, I want to thank all our sponsors. I want to thank Podbean. I want to thank Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Google Podcasts. I want to thank iHeartRadio. I want to thank Spotify. Yes, Spotify. Thank you, Spotify. I want to also thank Audible from Amazon Prime. Audible. Thank you for showcasing our Race and Ethnic Relations on Campus podcast show. Now, again, I'm your host, Dr. B, and I've been covering so many different topics over the, 2 years now since I've been doing the podcast shows. And this is one of the most glaring, discriminatory situations happening on a consistent basis in our nation. And let me just say, yes, I'm a little biased on this topic because, yes, I do love football. I have played the game at grade school, elementary, high school, college, but never at the NFL level. But I've been a follower and admirer of the NFL from day one. And let me just say, this relates to college students even today. Think about it. All the college students out there, think about how many of you are excited about sports, particularly maybe all different types of sports, but think about when you graduate and when you get your degree and you become a professional, and then you recognize that your job is dependent upon an owner of an organization, many times who doesn't look like you. And that owner of a corporation more than likely will hire someone that looks like him or her. Well, guess what? That's what's happening in the National Football League now in 2022. Yeah, that's what's happening in the National Football League. With over, how many players are of color are in the National Football League? How many players, look at the numbers, who are persons of color in the National Football League? And yes, this is a tough situation for me to even bring up because I love the game. Yet the reality in 2022 is catastrophic. It's deplorable to see so many young athletes, and I can say this, of course, young athletes. I'm 63 years of age, and I can see these young athletes, great athletes today, all across the board, focus on their game. Over 60, almost 60%, 65% of the players are persons of color. And yet, however, those who are head coaches is down to one black African American who is head coach in the NFL. Let me just say, finally, I did a YouTube on this as well, but I wanted to do a podcast show on this because it relates to college students. Because I just want you to see what the landscape truly is before you graduate. Those who really make the decision on who they hire. It's appalling. I've been very patient on this issue for quite some time. And I want to empower all the young Generation Z graduates out there. But when the Gen Z looks at the landscape, you can see the numbers. If you want to go into any particular job, you have to look at who really owns the corporation, the company, and find out if he or she, or they or them, are going to hire individuals like you. Yeah, you have to look at that now. Whether you're a freshman, sophomore, junior, or senior, or graduate student. This is the lay of the land in 2022. No matter how gifted you are in talent, unfortunately, you have to look at those who are the boards of different companies, and whether they have a tendency to hire individuals who do not look like them. And unfortunately, in the NFL, the sport that I most admire throughout my entire life, I mean, this is a bold statement from Dr. B, from my entire life, to look at this industry, the National Football League, and to come to this conclusion in 2022 that only one of the National Football League teams have a African American black coach as of today, January 31st, 2022. Only one of the 32 teams. And that one person is Coach Tomlin of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Just this 2021, Brian Flores of the Miami Dolphins was fired. And then David Culley of the Houston Texans was fired. So that leaves us with one coach, Mike Tomlin of the Pittsburgh Steelers, as a as designated as a black African American coach, head coach. Now, let me just say, just the past couple of days, I'm going to give props to Chicago Bears hiring a GM who's an African American general manager, young guy, as well as the Minnesota Vikings hiring a African American as a general manager as well. So you can see what's happening. You can see what's happening in the NFL. They're hiring persons of color at the general manager position. And they're still kind of following the Rooney Rule. Yeah, the Rooney Rule. Named after the great owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers, Rooney. And that rule was, make sure you interview at least one African American coach at the end of the year when you're determining a new head coach. And yes, every team is bringing in an African American candidate. Yeah, they're bringing in an African American candidate. But they also are selecting their preferential type of coach. And just today, this is Monday, January 31st, I saw where the Las Vegas Raiders just hired the New England Patriots offensive coordinator, who really didn't want to be a head coach, but he's under Bill Belichick of the New England Patriots, and practically every coach under Bill Belichick has been hired as a head coach. And yet, countless number of brothers, yeah, I had to say it like that, countless number of brothers have not been given the opportunity. Countless number of brothers. Yeah, they've been granted interviews, but you can tell, again, by 2022, the preferential selection that many of these owners have, they want a head coach that looks like them. I'm not going to name names. Because it would be wrong of me to name names. But many of the owners prefer to, and they're using their general managers now. You can see what's going on. Am I going? Yes, you can see what they're going to hire persons of color who are general managers. But the bottom line is they're still going to hire, and that's what happened in Chicago. Yeah, yeah, I called out a little bit of Chicago. The Bears. Yeah, I love Chicago. Don't get me wrong. I love the city of Chicago. I love the Bears tradition. Yeah, I love the Bears tradition. And I just saw the press conference of the new head coach and the general manager. The young general manager, African-American young man. And then I saw the head coach. That is what's going on. See, you can see a trend. And see, let me just, oh my gosh, am I going? Yes, you can see that the NFL follows a lot of trends. Owners just follow trends. They're not innovators. The National Football League are not innovators. Most industries are not innovators. I'm sorry to tell you this, Generation Z graduates. Most industries that you go into are not willing to take a chance. They play it very conservative. Still in 2022. That's the real landscape. And you can see it playing out, unfortunately, in the NFL. And I pay attention to all these other industries and relate this to my students. Because I want to prepare my students, my Generation Z students, for the real world. And unfortunately, the real world is very tough. I'm sorry to say this. It's not a bubble world. It's not your bubble world anymore. It's very tough. It's cutthroat. It's cutthroat. And you can see it play out in the NFL. Now, let me just say, again, this is January 31st. The latest I heard about one of the coaches that are leaving college, that's Jim Harbaugh. He is in line for the Minnesota Vikings job or the Miami Dolphins job, of which the Miami Dolphins fired an African-American brother, Brian Flores. Jim Harbaugh, a college coach, coming to the NFL. He's been an NFL coach before. He's been an NFL player, great player, quarterback, but he's ready to come to the NFL. The owners are waiting for this coach. Again, sometimes it's so interesting to see the preferential treatment out there for some folks versus the struggling, hardworking African-American offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators out there, been struggling for years in the NFL. They do not get an interview. They do not get an interview. And if they do get an interview, it's by what? Just by luck, or just by if I necessarily have to interview a person of color for this job. Adhering to the Rooney Rule. Again, that's a sad statement. Where we still have, at the taping of this show, January 31st, 2022, we still have one black African-American head coach in the NFL. And we're about ready to celebrate in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, the Super Bowl. The NFL and the commissioner should be totally embarrassed about the state of the NFL with regards to, oh yes, let's be equal. Let's do equity. Let's reach out to so many communities. Let's really relate to the folks out there. But the owners do not have to. It's quite obvious that the owners of these National Football League teams do not adhere to issues of equality. Wow, in 2022. And yet majority of the people that they pay, the athletes, and again, I feel for the athletes. They give their body and soul and everything to the team. And you would think, I know I would, at this point, if I was playing, I'd like to see somebody like me being head coach every now and then, in my professional career. But it just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. And to me, that's a sad statement on our society. We're a major industry. And just think about all the money, all the mega money that's going to be generated from the Super Bowl and all the people involved in the Super Bowl, the teams, the Cincinnati Bengals and the Los Angeles Rams and all the corporations. Super Bowl is going to be held in SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles, California. Mega money will be made by corporations. And unfortunately, you will not see an African American black head coach in this game. You'll see a lot of brothers out there playing their heart and soul out for each team. And one team's going to be the Super Bowl winner. But by the end of the day, I would think you would like to see a more equal playing field and individuals who are at higher levels, like head coaching, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, or general managers, who look like the players who are playing on the field, giving their heart and soul, their body to the game. That's where the NFL needs to step up and recognize their deficiency. And the NFL commissioner, hello, Goodall, needs to step up and legislate a policy and demand a policy among the owners that they will go out their way to hire on a long-term basis. And let me just say, the last African-American coach, Culley, who was fired by the Houston Texans, he only lasted 1 year. 1 year with the Houston Texans. And I used to live in Houston. Love Houston. But don't like their ownership. 1 year. Culley. Brian Flores, African-American coach, lasted only 3 years with the Miami Dolphins. So again, down to one head coach who is black African-American. That is Mike Tomlin of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And let me just say, his time is almost coming to an end too. What does that say for many young college students out there today? And I'm not just talking about college students of color. I'm talking about all college students. And that's what I love about teaching. College students you are all involved. You know the issues. And you have a voice. And you know when there is discrimination in an industry. And yes, I'm going to say it's a sad discriminatory practice policy that is being allowed. Being allowed. That's what's sad. Being allowed in the NFL. Being allowed. Being continued. And to me, this is the all-time low. Yeah, all-time low. No doubt about it. So the purpose of this podcast show is to bring a lot more light to this issue. Right before we celebrate the Super Bowl. And I'm going to get hyped up about the Super Bowl because I'm from Ohio. But I'm still going to bring the bigger issue to the forefront. And that is how there is a lack of black head coaches in the NFL as of today. And even when I remember when there were more African American coaches, and I'm just gonna name one African American coach who I will significantly respect, Tony Dungy. Tony Dungy. He was a former NFL player for the Pittsburgh Steelers, became head coach for the Indianapolis Colts, as well as the Tampa Bay Bucks and won a Super Bowl. Mr. Tony Dungy, who is currently on NBC with Sunday Night Football. Tony Dungy always talks about this issue. And he's trying to encourage the owners and the commissioner to step up. Mr. Tony Dungy is one African-American black coach who has stepped up and brought this issue to the forefront every time. So I'm going to bring him up in this podcast show because he recognized it's a serious issue. And I'm bringing this up because, hey, I love the game. But I see there is a serious problem with this industry that celebrates all types of folks, but is missing the key one of the key points. It's one thing to hire general managers. I'm really great to see that. Young general managers, persons of color. But who is usually in the limelight, on TV, on social media, every single day? It's the head coach. And for the entire country to recognize it's a different day and time and place, it's rewarding to see a person of color who is standing up for his team, his or her team, and moving them the best way they can to perform at a higher level. And don't forget, it's 2020. We've been talking about this. Oh wow! Oh my God! Since I was a little kid, it's been quite some time. Decades. This is not a new issue. This is a decade issue that's at its lowest point. And I'm sure one of the remaining teams, I don't know whether it's going to be the Giants off of whether it's the remaining teams, and I don't know if the remaining teams will hire an African American coach. Chicago Bears already named a coach. Denver Broncos about ready to name not an African American coach. Houston Texans, I don't know. I didn't see anything lately. Miami Dolphins, I don't know. Now they're still open for African American coach. Minnesota Vikings leaning towards Jim Harbaugh, and New York Giants already hired a non-African American coach. So there you go. What do you think about it? Again, I bring it out to the audience. What do you think about it? The state of the NFL and the lack of black head coaches. It's starting to just in one day, less than one day, it's going to be Black History Month. Yeah, Black History Month. Digest this. Only one black African American head coach in the NFL, which has over 60%, 65% black African American athletes. Football players, and you only have one head coach. That is, again, that's something. Oh no, I'm not going. Yes, I'm going. That would be something that some folks would take to court. If it was in another industry, they would take it to court and said this is totally a travesty. But they get away with it in the NFL. For somehow they're able to get away with it with the NFL. That should not happen in 2022 and beyond. Simply should not happen. So again, I want my listening audience to provide some feedback. Please email me at ejb678@gmail.com and give me your response on it. What do you think about it? Those of you who will graduate with a degree in sports management. Yes, in sports management. I have a lot of students who graduate with a degree in sports management. I have college players who play in different sports on a regular basis in my classes. How do you feel about it? So again, this is I think a very serious issue and affects many of my college students, not just now, but particularly in their near future. And I want them to think about it and raise this issue up among your other friends, your other professors, and say, why is this happening in 2022? And is this going to happen in my own profession, in my own major, or in my own profession? That's the landscape, how it really, really is in 2022. And I'm not going to I'm not going to present to you a politically correct situation in the real world. No, I'm not going to do that. That would be demeaning of me to do that. I'm going to tell you the best way I can what is happening in the real world, so you can get prepared for the real world. And that's what's happening as of January 31st, 2022, in the NFL, the National Football League, of which I thoroughly love. It's a sad, sad statement. And this is show number 60, the NFL and the lack of black head coaches. This is Dr. B. This is Dr. B. I want to thank all our sponsors. Podbean, thank you. I want to thank my publisher 2018, ABC Clio, for publishing my book 2018, Race and Ethnic Relations on Campus. I want to thank our other platforms. Thank you, Apple Podcasts. Thank you, Apple Podcasts. Thank you, Google Play. Thank you, Google Play. Thank you, iHeartRadio. Thank you, Audible. And thank you, Spotify. So again, I went a little bit long, but this is a very important issue to me because, again, I think I'm still a former athlete. I still think I love the game. I love the game, but I'm disappointed in the game and how it's not promoting people like me. There you go. This is Dr. B. Peace out, everybody. We out.